More than a decade after the Gulf War, the United States once again has Baghdad in its sights. It's the same place, even the same names.
We have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force.
We'll act with allies at our side, and we will prevail.
We will not fail.
Also there in '91, veteran war correspondent Peter Arnett.
The bomb cut through it just before 5 o'clock in the morning.
Now, he's back in Baghdad.
This is the real Baghdad.
To see what has changed. Does America really know the country it's preparing to attack?
The ordinary American citizen is being cheated.
Peter reveals a land hardly known.
She doesn't realize what a burqa is that covers the face.
USA!
And a dictator who appears popular with his people. Now that popularity could be used as a weapon. More deadly than anyone realizes.
That's really dangerous stuff.
Peter Arnett uncovers an Iraq we rarely see and meets a people on the brink of war. Iraq, January 17th, 1991. A moonless night sky in Baghdad is suddenly charged with the glow of 1,000 missiles. The Gulf War had begun. It's a war the world watched on television, spectators from afar. Only a few Westerners knew what was going on from the inside.
The bombing is intensifying now, and the explosions are coming closer to this part of town. There's lots of...
Peter Arnett was one of the few. And when other reporters pulled out, Peter stayed on to cover the war as bombs crippled Baghdad.
This is the 6th cruise missile to have come over our heads in the last half hour.
We have the makings of a major tragedy here in Baghdad today. This is the worst of the civilian incidents we have seen in Baghdad.
Even in the darkness, the thick poles of black smoke are rising from the city.
Peter Arnett reporting live from Baghdad.
Today, more than a decade later, the U.S. and Baghdad are again on the brink of war, and Peter Arnett plans to be there if it happens.
I think it is important to know that when we drop bombs in these distant locations, you know, there is real living flesh there. And to be mindful of that doesn't mean to say that we should not go to war with some countries, but there are human beings, and let's think about that.
Over the years, Peter has been constantly drawn to Iraq. It's been a source of much news, and this year, more so than usual.
Saddam Hussein has thumbed his nose at the world. He's a threat to the neighborhood. He's a threat to Israel. He's a threat to the United States of America. And we just have to deal with him. And the best way to deal with him is for the world to rise up and say, you disarm, and we'll disarm you. And if not, if at the very end of the day, nothing happens, the United States, along with others, will act.
The White House like to see Saddam Hussein dead?
Regime change is the policy in whatever form it takes.
The White House made its call. Now Peter wants to hear from the Iraqis. And the only way to do that is to go there.
In terms of covering conflict, I have not changed my view that the views of all sides are really important. My mission going back to Iraq this time was basically to see how stable Saddam administration was. Was Saddam Hussein really still in charge? What about the people of Iraq? Was there any way really of determining their solidarity with Saddam, their loyalty? So all your supplies you have to take. These are good shoes. You need boots to walk in the desert. Baghdad, you also need dress shoes because you occasionally get to interview officials like Saddam Hussein. He dresses very well in a suit. You have to look pretty natty. Also, of course, body armor, because Baghdad's always in a state of crisis. You never know when they may be bombing. This is little enough, but it can help protect your vital organs if you happen to get too close to the action.
Preparing for war is something Peter has done many times before. 19 wars in 40 years as a journalist. Vietnam, Peter's first war. For 13 years, he was close to the action, and his reporting was close to the bone. He often reported what the American government didn't want people to hear, and he was frequently under attack. Not only from enemy fire, but also from politicians in Washington.
In Vietnam, what I learned was that the best reporting is the reality of the battlefield. If you're going to risk your life in these dangerous encounters, there is no point in risking your life or, trumpeting some propaganda. If you're risking your life, you've got to believe that what you're doing is really important. And the importance of being an observer in these situations is to be the truth teller. And I thought it was well worth the price, the criticism, to be able to impart these truths.
Peter's unrelenting determination won him a Pulitzer Prize. He went on to other wars and famous interviews. He has spent time with Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, is one of the few Westerners to have interviewed Osama bin Laden. And during the Gulf War, he even recorded a rare interview with Saddam Hussein. Today, Peter finds a Baghdad that is familiar, yet different.
What made this trip different was 9/11. I was fully aware going to Baghdad on this occasion that Iraq was in the crosshairs. I had a sense of foreboding because I had a real sense that sooner or later, we're going to have a replay of the Gulf War. Gulf War I, suddenly Gulf War II.
Even Peter's first stop, the Al Rashid Hotel, has a sense of déjà vu. The Al Rashid was home to Peter and other foreign journalists during the Gulf War, and it would likely be their home again in the event of a new war. One thing has changed. There's a new motif at the entrance. George Bush isn't the only familiar face here. Government media watcher Sadoun Al-Janabi is an old friend.
So here we are.
Sadoun spent many days and nights with Peter in the hotel bunker.
Over here.
Of course, because this area was filled with people.
Yes, exactly.
Hundreds of people in here.
Yeah. But I remember this bench here, these two stairs. We used to sit here, and I used to write.
I had to do my censored report. Remember the time I wrote a report about bombing damage around Baghdad, and I gave you the report to read, and you said, I cannot accept this report. And I said, but why? And you said, you have split the infinitive. It's a true story.
It's a true story.
So I had to correct my English.
Your English was very bad. and still is.
Thank you very much.
So
tell us about the bunker here, and how many people were in here.
I think there were around 150, something like that.
But is the Al Rashid shelter still safe?
Now this bunker, do you believe it's safe from bombing attack down here?
Yeah.
Even the most recent bombs that the U.S. Air Force has developed, what they call bunker busters?
Of course not.
For Peter, the most significant memory of this hotel isn't the shelter. It was here in 1991, while Baghdad was under attack, that Peter was summoned to the most important interview of his career.
When I was taken back up to my room by 3 or 4 crew-cut security people and strip searched with my shoes tapped and the lapels of my jacket examined, I figured this was going to be an important interview. And when I had to wash my hands and disinfect it, I knew this would be the big one, because Saddam has a phobia about diseases.
Peter had never met Saddam Hussein, but had studied the dictator's history.
You've described this current crisis, it's a war now, as the mother of all battles. Every field commander in history has had doubts about the outcome of the battle ahead. Do you have any doubts whatsoever that you will win?
Not even 1 in a million.
The Iraqi leader has always had confidence in himself. Even as a poor village kid, stealing to feed his family, Saddam, by his own account, demanded an education. An uncle helped send him to school, and when Saddam was a teenager, he moved to Baghdad and later joined the Socialist Ba'ath Party. In 1959, they needed a hitman, and Saddam, already with a reputation as a thug, was eager to help. Saddam took part in an assassination attempt on then Iraqi leader Abdul Karim Qasem. Saddam doesn't hide this history. In fact, he flaunts it. He even hired James Bond director Terrence Young to help with this reenactment. Saddam was slightly injured in the real attack and had to swim the Tigris River to escape, a feat also celebrated and relived. The man in this footage probably isn't Saddam, but a lookalike. Saddam has body doubles he hires for security. Saddam fled to Syria and then Egypt, where he enrolled at the University of Cairo. Despite the distance from home, he remained an active member of the Ba'ath Party.
The storied city of Baghdad, capital of Iraq, has been the scene once more of bloody revolt.
In 1963, the CIA aided a revolution that saw Qasem's government replaced by the Ba'ath Party, and Saddam returned to Iraq, again as the party hitman and torturer. After one of his relatives was made president in 1968, Saddam was appointed his deputy. 11 years later, when the president resigned, Saddam secured the top job. As all would soon learn, Saddam lost none of his brutality or ruthlessness. After taking office, he announced to party members that there were traitors in their midst. He started reading names.
بدن فاضل مؤيد عبد الله طالب صويلح اسماعيل النجار زهير يحيى مو زهير المريض زهير يحيى اللي بينكم ابراهيم عبد علي.
The list included some of Saddam's closest friends, and he gave the appearance of being upset as one by one they were led from the room. Those remaining were then divided into groups, firing squads, to execute the accused.
The regime of Saddam Hussein has never hidden its ruthlessness. It's very clear. I mean, they have movies and books extolling the violent nature of their ascendancy to power. They'll say, well, all revolutions are like that. What about the American Revolution? The glorification of battles and death. You know, they say, so what else is new?
Looking surprisingly relaxed in the front row on that day was Tariq Aziz. After Saddam Hussein himself, Tariq Aziz is perhaps the most familiar face outside the country. He has been Saddam's foreign policy advisor for more than 20 years and is now Deputy Prime Minister.
He is a spokesman for Saddam. He is part of the inner circle, and he is basically the voice of the president.
Peter has interviewed Aziz before, and now he is Peter's best chance of finding out Iraq's strategy should war break out.
So I hope we're here for a couple of weeks. I'd love the opportunity to meet
How
you
long
again.
are you staying with us?
A couple of weeks.
Oh, they're great.
So I saw O'Day the other day.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, of course.
Nice meeting you.
Peter makes his bid for an interview. Maybe it'll come later, maybe it won't. Meanwhile, Peter hits the streets.
This is typical Baghdad market of second-hand clothes. That's what people use here, second-hand clothes.
Are Iraqis content? Or are they unhappy and looking for a regime change?
Of course, on the back streets, maybe there's a little political action we don't know about yet.
In other countries, Peter would just ask people what they think. But in Iraq, foreign journalists are closely watched by government officials who must be present at interviews even about the most basic topics.
Sure, we'll wait a minute. A reality for every journalist visiting Iraq is the minder. That is the person sent by the Ministry of Information to accompany reporters everywhere they go. That minder is at every interview. That minder is in your vehicle when you travel in suburbs or neighboring cities. That minder is listening to everything that you ask and listening to every response.
The woman who's the mother who's getting all this, it'd be great to get her name and how does she feel about, if we could just talk to her a little about how she feels about getting all the food. Ask him if we could do that. Just a couple of questions. Not about politics, just about food, okay? That's great. We'll do it in a minute.
But even without a minder, it would still be difficult to get a true sense of the feeling of the general population.
I've got no illusions that even if minders were not there, you know, the average Iraqi is not going to speak candidly about their lives there. They have to live there. The worst guide is to just openly ask people in the street, in front of a camera, what they think of their government, because they will invariably wax very positive about it.
Does she feel happy for the government?
What do you think of the assistance from the government? Is this good?
Yes, this is assistance from the government and Allah. And may Allah grant our president long life.
Okay. Could you thank you very much? Shukran. Shukran. Okay. So I tend to go about it in another way. I say, well, you know, what do you feel about your neighbors, neighboring countries, Arab countries? What do you feel about the United States, Britain, to get a sense of their attitudes towards others?
Asking questions about the United States, Peter hears from medical student Montador Tather.
I love American peoples, not the American government. They have two faces, face for the Jewish and face for the Arabs and Muslims. For the Jewish, it is the kind face, helpful face, while for the Muslims it is monster face.
Peter finds this sentiment a common theme.
They make a difference between an evil American government, whether it's led by Bill Clinton or George W. Bush, and the American people, which they invariably express support of.
Thank you.
Good, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Unlike the Taliban or Osama bin Laden, who attacked all of American culture as being completely destructive and corrupting of Islamic ideals. They're not a fundamentalist society with an ingrained hatred of the West.
On the ground, much of Baghdad can look like Afghanistan.
In fact, this reminds me very much of the Kabul market when we were over there recently.
But there are many differences. In Iraq, for example, unlike Afghanistan, many Western books are available.
You can get copies of Time magazine from 1957 here if you really want to. The old Time magazine. The Atlantic Monthly from 1963. They treasure reading materials here. There's medical books in Arabic and English and French, German. Look at this. I love this one here, The American Past, Conflicting Interpretations of the Great Issues, Volume 2.
About 58% of Iraqis can read. That's largely due to Iraq's education system. To find out more, Peter moves on to Baghdad University.
Haven't been here for years.
Here, some 36,000 students, men and women alike, study everything from home economics to architecture to veterinary science. And it seems all universities offer courses covering Ba'ath Party ideology and Saddam Hussein philosophy. After all, education is courtesy of the government.
All education, of course, is free from grade school through high school, even to university education. Internet cafe.
Computers are allowed, and while the government blocks web-based emails, there is at least some access to the World Wide Web.
500 dinars an hour. So even though that is only 25 cents, students really can't afford it. So you do have a free education, but the internet is denied to most because it's a lot of money for them.
Internet access may be restricted by economics, but otherwise the average student here could pass for a student in the U.S. They enjoy Western fashion, with not a burqa cover in sight. And many young Iraqis have a distinctly Western taste in music. Sanctions have not stopped a steady flow of pop, rock, and hip-hop. This bootleg CD store opened in 1997 and is thriving.
We have a duplicator, a CD duplicator, and we got the blank CDs, and we make copies for the people, and it's very cheaper for them, because it costs about $1 for less than $1, and it's nothing. Comparing with it to $30 for the original one, yeah.
While the Iraqi government is non-religious, most Iraqis are Muslims. Sunni Muslims account for about 1/3 of the population and live all over the country. But roughly 2/3 of Iraqis are Shiites, mainly concentrated in the south. Iraq's Shiites are historically more traditional than Sunnis. Many Shiite women wear black clothing, and men full-length tunics. But there has been relatively little fundamentalist activity. Saddam has seen fundamentalism as a threat to his regime, and in the past, he has suppressed the Shiites. Such control, also over Western influences, creates great ironies. In Baghdad, there are books in many languages, but no Western newspapers. There is internet access, but emails are blocked. There is American music, but take a look at Iraqi television. This is State TV, one of 3 primary channels in Iraq. Another is run by Saddam Hussein's son. All 3 carry similar sentiments. The clips are mesmerizing, relentless, seemingly unstoppable. All around the country, Saddam's image is everywhere. His portraits are inescapable. Even his hands are said to be the model for this giant monument to the Iraq-Iran war. He's not only in your face on the streets, his presence may also be felt at your wedding.
Nuptials in Baghdad. Good news.
Peter finds some lucky lottery winners. Their prize is a wedding, all expenses paid, by Saddam Hussein to help celebrate his birthday. Not just for one couple, or 2, or 6, but some 500 lucky couples from across the country.
There we are. That's a close-up. Very pretty.
Thank you.
Pretty good. Brides are always beautiful.
Peter is told the prize includes free gowns, a honeymoon, and wedding portraits.
Saddam is also willing to provide an element of romance because all those couples, not only did they get their wedding gowns, and the man got their wedding suits and ties and all the rest of it, plus a week-long honeymoon in a major hotel in Baghdad, the brides all got made up, and they all looked exactly the same, of course, but they were made up, their hair was beautiful.
The idea is that couples are forever beholden to each other and to Saddam Hussein. Elsewhere at this time, there are giant birthday rallies. But are these special events any indication of the level of local support for the Iraqi leader? It's hard to say, because these great marches are choreographed by the government.
They're busing in people from Baghdad and all over the country. And this will give the impression that President Saddam Hussein has massive popular support. Maybe he does. Certainly this will give the impression today that he hasn't.
There are banners written in English. Young girls decked out in pseudo-suicide bomber garb. Even sung clearly under the influence of Western culture. The more Peter sees, the more he believes that on this part of his journey, the revelry is sincere.
There was real enthusiasm in those who were marching, and the young students, the labor organizations. There was cheering and a real sense of excitement and support.
Another thing seems clear. The dictator that 3 U.S. presidents have vowed to restrain for the past decade is flaunting his powers of endurance to the world. Saddam's presence is everywhere and nowhere. He hasn't been seen in public for 2 years. The crowds here march by an assembly of leaders headed by Saddam's cousin.
Saddam Hussein has played into the idea of national pride. I think you'll find a lot of Iraqis who say that he is great for our country. So when hundreds of thousands of people come out for his birthday celebrations, these are meant to show the neighbors that he does have a considerable support, and this strengthens his hand in dealing with neighbors who might otherwise see him as a weak, very weak leader.
Once Saddam was seen as a worthy leader not only by other Arab states, but also by the superpowers. As president, he carefully negotiated to get weapons from the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the U.S. provided Saddam with satellite intelligence to help in the war he launched against Iran. Fighting ended in 1988 and nearly bankrupted Iraq. Saddam's next target was Kuwait. Its oil production, Saddam charged, pushed down prices, and he accused Kuwaitis of stealing oil from a shared field. Ruthlessly, Saddam had his army, one of the largest in the Middle East, invade Kuwait. The response from the rest of the world resulted in the Gulf War. In the 6-week war, Iraq's military suffered severely. Thousands of troops were killed or wounded. Despite the defeat and loss of life, Saddam declared that he was victorious.
It's one of the great spins, turning a defeat into victory. The reason that the Saddam and the Iraqi administration argues it was a victory is that the government survived.
But could Saddam and his government survive another war? There's only one person Peter can ask.
Peter, Arnett again. How you doing? I believe the
Back in Baghdad, at a 4-day conference, Peter once again tries Deputy President Tariq Aziz.
We'd very much like to do a full interview with you, sir.
Yeah, I know.
Run the whole...
I know.
Aziz promises an interview before Peter has to leave town.
Knock a few bodyguards out of the way.
Maybe Peter's persistence will pay off. But beyond the rallies, he still wants to get a deeper sense of what everyday Iraqis think of their leader. Peter makes his way to one of the poorest parts of Baghdad, Saddam City.
Amazing.
He wants to visit some old friends, the Anran family.
About a decade ago, I did many stories on families and how people were trying to live during the bombing and the aftermath. And I was walking along this street, main street of Baghdad one day, and this man was wheeling a cart. So we talked to him, took pictures of the cart, and we followed him home. And I met his family, and I just have kept in touch with the family, and here I'm going to see him again after 4 years' absence.
They will die later. She said they go to visit his parents.
But they still live here, the same family. Okay, that's good. That's what I wanted to know. Okay. They're visiting their family. Fine, we'll come back later.
Shukran.
Shukran. Shukran. They'll be back later. They're visiting their family.
While Peter waits, he moves around the local market.
Now, this is the real Baghdad. I mean, you can go downtown and you can see the shopping centers and the nice new buildings, but basically downtown's government Baghdad, and this is real Baghdad. There's well over 1 million, maybe 2 million people here. The Shia people, they're living in poverty, and it's a source of potential unrest for the government. They've had problems here. They had to put down rioting occasionally over food or politics. It's also a barometer of the temperature of, certainly, Baghdad is a city of the Iraqi public. It's a tinderbox in a sense. There's lots of people, overpopulation, and it's poor, but it's an integral part of Baghdad. It's an integral part of Baghdad. So we're here with all our friends. Hi, guys. Salam alaikum, huh? Alaikum salam.
This market seems better stocked than on Peter's last visit 4 years ago. But it's still unclear how much of this produce is affordable for poorer Iraqi families.
Generally, the only thing really thriving here is population growth. Plenty of that. Plenty of that.
Behind the market, the Anran family courtyard also seems well populated. Peter's friends are home now, and they invite him inside.
Hello. Salam alaikum.
How are you, Shiaz? How are your health?
Hello, I'm very pleased to see her again. That's their daughter, right? Salam alaikum. I remember you when you were just 11 years old.
Since Peter was here last, the family has grown from 4 to 5 children. The mother, Layla, has one more on the way. The father, Salman, tells Peter life is generally a struggle, but that they are well fed and happy.
God is providing everything we need. This has been going on year after year.
Salman's health is poor, but he does manage a janitor's job at the local mosque. His income amounts to about $15 US a month. Nora, the oldest girl, has given up school to help her mother who has developed a heart condition.
I am studying, but mostly helping my mother.
Wouldn't you like to go to school?
Yes.
Nora's most likely future is early marriage, many kids, poverty. The family occupies one room off a courtyard, where several other families use common cooking and bathroom facilities. On the walls are photos from Peter's previous visits. His arrival is always an occasion for photographs. Visits and pictures and war. These are the things that have bound Peter to the Anran family for more than a decade.
By Western standards, this family seems to be living in abject poverty. You know, it is a pretty crude accommodations. But most Iraqis are living out, in desert villages and mud huts. So to this family, to have moved to Baghdad and actually having a shelter around them, to be in the center of the city, to be able to go to a nearby school, and for the husband to be working at the mosque as a sort of a caretaker, this is big for them. So we have to not make the mistake of judging Iraqi lives by our own standards.
Salman and Layla say they don't understand why America hates Saddam Hussein. And to Peter, they seem genuinely loyal to their president.
What does he say now, Kareem?
زيارتك كلش حلوة يعني فرحنا أنت تحضر سيد الرئيس ميلاده.
He said your coming to Baghdad make us so happy and especially when you come in Saddam's birthday.
Peter is left with no doubt. The Anrans do not want a new government.
I think the question you would have to ask is, will this family be better served by a government other than Saddam Hussein's? And my feeling would be these are sort of the underclass who probably would not be affected one way or the other by whoever leads the country.
To understand why Iraqis would actually support Saddam, you have to look at the story of where the average family gets its food, beginning with the end of the Gulf War in 1991. At that time, the United Nations was adamant that Iraq not rearm with weapons of mass destruction. Economic sanctions aimed to stop oil being sold for arms, but the lack of money also began starving the people. After much resistance, Saddam finally agreed to a program that swapped oil not for weapons, but for food. Now, 6 years later, many Iraqis say that Saddam is a benevolent leader who saved them from hunger. The food ration scheme supports an 8-member family for less than $1 each month.
250 is approximately 12-15 cents. Yeah. For basically 20 days of food. Yeah.
The ration includes sugar, rice, cooking oil, lentils, flour for bread, cheese, and milk. According to UN officials in Baghdad, everybody gets a fairly adequate food ration without exception, without exemption, in every corner of the country. The irony is that Saddam was pressured to take on the program, but now it feeds his own popularity.
Saddam Hussein has been in power 20 years. There's been very little civil unrest and opposition. Part of it is the ability of his security services to suppress it. Another part of it is the fact that he successfully promoted himself as the great leader. And this goes beyond just the posters and the statues. It's a social policy that feeds most Iraqis and gives them opportunities with health and education. It's part of his grand plan to maintain control and support within the country.
Peter finds that, for Saddam, boosting his popularity is only one part of his strategy. The dictator also makes the most of opportunities to promote feelings against the U.S. government. This young girl is practicing for theater, but her passion seems more than everyday play acting. She rehearses at the Ala Maria air raid shelter. Here, during the middle period of the Gulf War, 2 U.S. bombs killed hundreds of civilians. Peter remembers it well.
The U.S. military said at the time that they believed it was used by senior officials of the Iraqi government. It's in a middle-class section of the city. Bombs hit early in the morning, 2 of them, and over 300, basically women and children, were killed. There's a lot of pictures around here in the first day that it happened. This one, for example, there's the fire trucks outside, smoke coming out of it, people gathering around. It's me climbing the ladder to the top of the shelter to get in. This is Dave Russ, the cameraman. In the hotel, when they told us we can come here, they said no censorship. You can do anything you want, talk to anyone you want, go anywhere in that building. We don't care. Anything you want to say, you say. Because this is an act of cruelty, of humanitarian crime. You tell it. The U.S. government did claim later that it was used as a military transmission point because there were antennae on the bunker. But the accounts, the publicity associated with the deaths of so many civilians persuaded the Pentagon to relocate bombing targets in Baghdad to elsewhere in the country. And in fact, the bombing of Baghdad ended at that point.
The shelter was a tragic bombing. Now it's one of several Gulf War remnants being used by Saddam to help generate anti-U.S. sentiment. Other sites can be found south of Baghdad. Peter heads to the site of some of the most intense fighting of the Gulf War, near the city of Basra by the Kuwaiti border. U.S. bombing has created a graveyard of Iraqi tanks.
In front of the tank, but don't go too close. It's potentially explosive. That's a good shot of the tank too. You've rarely seen destroyed Iraqi vehicles in Iraq. They've been very shy about showing the many destroyed tanks that were hit during the war, and these are some of the first we've seen, even though they've clearly been sitting here for years, rusting. It's only in the last few months they've really allowed media to have a look.
Bombs left to rot can still be deadly.
One exploded the other day, killing a woman and wounding 2 children in the Iraqi Daily News yesterday, around Basra. They were farmers and they found an unexploded bomblet, carried it off, exploded as they were carrying it, killed the woman and injured the 2 kids. So it's really dangerous stuff.
It's not just unexploded bombs that pose a threat.
Iraqi officials say there could be radioactive materials here. We're wearing these masks because as we walk around this war garbage, we stir up dust, and they say maybe there's particles. I don't know how effective these masks are. I think even talcum powder would get through, but the point is, they may have something we don't know.
When some U.S. munitions strike, the byproduct is a burning spray of toxic dust that can remain until wind or water takes it away.
Got it. Good one. Thank you.
Good one.
For Peter, it's obvious why the Iraqi government allowed him to come here.
They want to link the destruction of these tanks and vehicles with what they see as a rising incident of cancer caused by radioactive materials used in U.S. weaponry, the depleted uranium weapons specifically fired by tanks. Does it leave a residue that's going to kill, hundreds of thousands in the future? We don't know, but the Iraqis say the proof suggests it is. We'll never find out for sure, but we are down here to have a look at what they have in the way of evidence.
At this women's hospital in Basra, Nafa Ali struggles, doctors say, with cancer of the lymph nodes. The doctors assert that this was caused by radioactive substances left by U.S. weapons. True or not, such illnesses are now used to promote ill feeling towards America.
I hold the Americans responsible, also because there is no medication here.
Doctor, what is Zaina's problem?
she's one of the new cases that arrived to our hospital. She's gotten leukemia, in fact.
According to officials here, children and young adults at this hospital suffer from leukemia, cancer of the adrenal gland and lymph nodes, and some cancers of the brain.
Before the Gulf War, you didn't have children with cancer, or what were the statistics?
We have gotten a very little amount.
Small numbers,
We
yeah.
have a very small number and a very little amount.
Iraqi government figures do show an increase in cancer cases, but preliminary studies by the World Health Organization have found no link to depleted uranium munitions. The organization is waiting on Saddam's green light for further study. Many Iraqis certainly believe that here the U.S. is the evildoer, and again a looming threat. Meanwhile, most of the outside world sees Saddam Hussein as the threat, a brutal man trying to procure ever more powerful weapons. Inspectors recently returned to Iraq to search for weapons, and any attempt by Saddam to hamper them could trigger a war. Would that really be a war Iraq thinks it could win? Again, Deputy President Tariq Aziz may have the answer. On the last day of the Baghdad conference, Peter reminds Aziz of his promise for an interview.
Okay, we're still very interested in interviewing you, sir.
Monday in the morning I am leaving.
Peter has not been forgotten. Aziz keeps his word, and Peter gets his interview.
Pieces they'll all be airing. Talking to him on this occasion, it was an opportunity to get a sense of where his thinking had gone. The great sense of optimism and confidence that they had during the Gulf War. Misplaced to a large degree, but that they had. Did they still maintain that confidence? Were they still absolutely sure that they could basically wriggle out of this confrontation? Various administrations have suggested it would not take much to bring a government change.
Well, that's
resentment. What is your response to these continuing suggestions?
That is what they say, you see, and that is they might wrongly believe, but that's not the truth in Iraq. They don't know Iraq. They don't know Iraq. That's why they will regret. I'm sure that if they attack Iraq, in the end, they will regret their failure.
And yet the United States can summon enormous power at its disposal, as you well know. Do you believe that your country could sustain, a continuing series of air assaults as similar to 91 or even greater?
Iraq is one of the most powerful nations in this region. The government, this government, we have been in power for 34 years. Each and every soldier in the Iraqi army, and many even civilians who have had good, excellent military training, who participate in the war in Iran for 8 years. Those people are going to fight in a completely different manner.
In 1991, the war was military against military. Next time, if there is another war, Aziz expects it to be less conventional.
If the West goes in this time, it will be aimed at government change. That'll make it a very different war. It'll be fought to the finish.
Fighting to the finish could mean fighting in Baghdad. Would local support for Saddam hold fast in a war? Tariq Aziz reveals to Peter, with chilling confidence, the extent to which Iraq is now prepared for an urban conflict.
There is a fact which they don't know. Now, at this moment, there are hundreds of thousands of weapons in the hands of the Iraqi people. Those have been distributed by the government itself, by the Iraqi army. We are doing that because we are sure of their patriotism. We are sure that they will fight any aggression, and intentionally.
I really don't doubt that it's actually happened. The fact that they have enough confidence in many people to give them weapons, I think is very significant. In Saddam's employ are 1 million or so people, not only in the military, but when the government, within the security services, and this translates to several million people who have a definite, a definite stake in Saddam's future, in his survival.
And he cultivates these people, and it will be important in a showdown.
Saddam once attacked the Kurds in Iraq's north with chemical weapons. Now, Aziz claimed that even the Kurds are on good terms with the government.
We are not at war with them. We provide them with food, we provide them with medicine, we provide them with electricity. We run the dams in the region, and they come and go and talk to us.
Perhaps the final string in Saddam's bow is one that plays to religion. And in the interest of survival, he started playing a different tune. Bit by bit, Saddam has been catering to the desires of Iraq's 20 million Muslims, especially the Shiite majority. Trying to win them over, he added, in Arabic, "God is great," to the Iraqi flag. He's made the teaching of the Quran compulsory in schools. He's banned alcohol in restaurants. And every year, on his birthday, of course, Saddam opens a new mosque.
Such beauty, such cost.
Saddam tries to associate himself with God as much as possible, even, according to mosque officials, using his own blood for this writing of the Quran.
I wonder how much of his blood was used.
28 liters.
28 liters of blood?
Yeah.
Wow.
During 2 years.
Oh,
During 2 years.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Perhaps soon, the pages of history will also be marked with the blood of Saddam Hussein. If there is war, it seems his only chance is if he's managed to create a united Iraq. Or perhaps he'll avoid a conflict altogether. Either way, Peter plans to be in Baghdad for the next chapter of the Iraqi drama.
Stories are worth risking your life to cover. If indeed fate wills it that Saddam is swept from power, I mean, as a journalist, I'll be really interested in seeing that happen, or seeing the consequences of it.